Hello, stranger. It's your boy, the love child of Joe Rogan and Terry Wogan, Jack Slack. And this is the Fights Gone By podcast, episode 49, a very special Fights Gone By podcast, because we're talking about the preordained biggest fight ever, the one to decide the rivalry, the bragging rights, who gets to claim the accomplishments. It's John Jones versus drug testing. No, we're going to be talking about Mayweather and McGregor, but before I recorded this podcast, I immediately got news that John Jones tested positive for a Cold War steroid. I love it when guys get tested and come back for stuff that, we were harvesting from the muscles of bulls back before we had any of this science. But apparently the testing procedures improved rapidly on this one recently, which is why it was previously a blind spot and why multi-millionaire John Jones would still be wasting his money on a Cold War steroid. Still news coming out about that, but I'm assuming that Malignaggi is breaking out his big ring binder of tainted supplements. What have they been sneaking a 1980s steroid into? Word is that he could face a 4-year ban, which would, it wouldn't be the end of his career necessarily, but how many other things can he do if he's still under contract to the UFC, fighting-wise? He could go into grappling, he could maybe try and become a world champion in BJJ or no-gi or something like that, or just do super fights, but I can't imagine the money in that is anywhere near the money in beating people up. So much for the UFC's one of the draw. Now he just had to beg Ronda Rousey to come back and hope someone hits Amanda Nunes in the knee with a crowbar on the way to the arena. Anyway, you find me in a good mood. I've been busy as a Japanese prisoner of war. A happy one. Basically, if you haven't seen it already, go to thefightprimer.com or just fightprimer.com for my whatever it is, 4,000 words and 30 minutes of video breakdown of the Mayweather-McGregor fight. Basically, I told everyone I wasn't doing anything for this fight, but I actually spent the last 3 weeks learning to use Adobe, basically, all the Adobe software. I always video edited on Sony Vegas before, which is useful and intuitive, but nowhere near as versatile as the Adobe software. But if you've ever used Creative Cloud or any Adobe stuff, you will know the problem is that where something like Sony Vegas, you can very quickly become competent with it, with just the basics. In Adobe, they hide all the basic functions behind all the shit you'll never need. So it was, 10 minutes of work, and then I'd be Googling how to do X tutorial, and then I'd be watching a 20-minute video on it, and you just lose so much time that way. The other thing about Adobe is that they've got so many different bits of software. You're like, guys, could these not just overlap a bit? Take away some of these and just have them done by other applications. So a lot of my time was spent Googling things like difference between Photoshop and Illustrator. But at any rate, I spent a long time working on those videos. I've dropped them all on the YouTube channel. Well, if you're on YouTube listening to this now, you'll see them in the sidebar probably. But I dropped them on my YouTube channel. There's 3 parts. Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather, and then the unknowns. I will be remolding them just into one 30-minute video for people to watch. I'll put that up either today or tomorrow. But definitely go read the article because, I spent a good amount of time on it. The plan was just to do this as a one-off, as an independent thing, while I'm sorting out all this stuff with new, talking to editors and writing stuff for magazines and stuff. Also, Vice Sports is coming back in some form. So, it's up in the air what I'm doing there. I think I'll probably write some pieces for them still. But I wanted to do this just as a one-off. And the traffic has been so amazing that I might well just keep going with this. I don't know. But yes, thefightprimer.com. Go check it out. Also, I didn't sort the domains. I don't do much of the technical stuff. But I was told the difference between thefightprimer.com and theprimer.com was 14 grand. So 2-word URLs, which people just buy up anyway, any 2-word URL already gone. But if I wanted that, I think that's probably an investment for later on. Anyway, you find me in end of term mood. When you're about to go on holiday from work, or vacation, as my friends call it in America. The last day, just anything that comes across your desk, you're like, I'm going to make this dog shit. And I hope it's not here on my desk still when I come back from my holiday. So I got a feeling like that at the moment. Drinking from a big mug of tea, eating a whole sleeve of Jaffa cakes because I'm a mad lad today. might even chew them into the mic. But what we're going to do is I'm just going to sit here, we're going to rap about this fight, we'll touch on John Jones and his drug stuff, we'll touch on Bigfoot Silva versus Rico Verhoeven. Good God, why is that happening? And we'll mainly be talking about the big fight. And we'll answer some questions. I've got some email questions, I've got some Facebook questions. I've got a lot of stuff to catch up on. May not do it all in this episode, but, we're just going to rap until I feel that we've exhausted this topic. And to be honest, I feel the community as a whole exhausted this topic within a week of the fight being announced. Right, Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor are going to fight this Saturday in 8-ounce gloves, which is apparently McGregor terrain. And it's going to be in Vegas at is it the T-Mobile something? It's not the MGM, which shocked me, because Floyd had a very long contract with them. But if you ever were one of those people, I was one of those people who were like, they'll never get this sorted. But if you were ever one of those people that was like, oh, he'll never sanction a 0-0 boxer to fight Floyd Mayweather, you don't understand what commissions actually do. They make money off fights, so they will do almost anything to keep the big fights going. And they even actually went out of their way to sell this fight. They voted on 8-ounce gloves. Just so you know, Floyd Mayweather's wanted 8-ounce gloves in his last 5 fights because he went up in weight and crossed the lower limit for the 10-ounce gloves. And he wanted them forever. He just wanted them back. But now that apparently there wasn't enough interest in this fight, or they weren't selling those 10 grand floor seats or whatever they are fast enough, Nevada State Athletic Commission actually got together and said, oh, we're voting on the 8-ounce gloves. We're going to allow the 8-ounce gloves, just so that cretins on the internet could go, 8-ounce gloves? Those are small. That's McGregor territory. And McGregor, of course, played it up. He was like, oh, if we used 8-ounce gloves, he wouldn't make it 1 round. And you're just watching this going, Jesus Christ. Do people understand the difference between an 8-ounce glove and a 4-ounce MMA glove? Apparently not. Anyway, that's the least interesting part of this fight, but it still was hilarious that Nevada would go out of their way to do that. So if you ever think that they're impartial in anything, just wipe that from your mind right now. But the fight itself, I am struggling to believe that the way Conor McGregor throws punches is anything that Floyd Mayweather hasn't seen before. Yes, a southpaw left hand is a good southpaw left straight is a dangerous thing. But Conor McGregor, you very rarely see him combination punch, obviously. He relies on his kicks an awful lot in mixed martial arts. People think he's just this left hand, but the way that the boxing game works is to deal with punches, you move your head, because it keeps you in range to counterpunch. As soon as you start throwing left high kicks, the slip to the elbow side and the duck straight down suddenly are off the table. And if you ever watch any of Conor McGregor's fights, he constantly throws that left high kick into his opponent's forearm to keep them upright. Watch the Siva fight, watch the Mendes fight, any of his fights, Bushinger especially. The more you throw that left high kick, the less inclined the opponent is to start ducking their head towards it. Then you have the fact that he's a very side-on fighter. His right hook very rarely has much stank on it because he fights so side-on, which is part of why his left hand travels such a big distance, has such power in it. But it also means if the opponent starts circling past his lead foot, as you do against southpaws, typically, unless you're, disrupting the orthodoxies and you're going the other way. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, if you are fighting a southpaw, normally you try and circle outside their lead foot. You go inside the lead foot, to do other stuff, but standard turn of the century 101 is circle past their lead foot. If you do that against Conor McGregor in the cage, and he wasn't allowed to kick, he wouldn't have a lot of options. He uses that wheel kick and the back kick to the body to catch guys as they walk past him. You did see him improve his jab in the second Diaz fight, but generally you don't see his jab a lot. And when he does lead, it tends to be like that long spring-in 1-2, and he drops his hands immediately after doing it. All of these, not great signs for for fighting a world-class boxer who is so used to doing as much as possible with just 2 weapons. And an elbow. We'll get onto that later. Slurp of tea, bear with me. So yes, the kicking game, big part of Conor McGregor's game. Floyd has like a slight height and reach disadvantage in this fight, but if you watch McGregor's fight against Holloway, who's a very rangy guy with great boxing, that low line side kick was a big part of stopping Holloway stepping in and bouncing in and out. So the idea that Conor McGregor is this guy who boxes almost exclusively in MMA but throws kicks just for the fun of it is pretty erroneous. Is that a word? It's wrong. But, you know, the southpaw thing is interesting because the old story goes, Floyd Mayweather, after he fought his first professional southpaw, his dad called from jail, called his handlers to say, don't ever put him in with a southpaw again. Problem is, that story was told on the broadcast of the Chambay Mitchell fight, which was like 2002. I don't know when that was, but it was over a decade ago. He's only fought a few southpaws since then, but then southpaws aren't tremendously common in boxing compared to MMA. MMA, you got tons of guys coming over from wrestling. You got guys from Jeet Kune Do, which teaches strong hand forward. Both of those do, actually. You got guys from Muay Thai who typically just choose whichever one they like. You got all these guys from different styles. Boxing has been very slow to adopt like the right-handed southpaw or there are still guys who are left-handed who are taught to box orthodox. Oscar De La Hoya, one of the key examples there. I believe Andre Ward is left-handed. Felix Trinidad was left-handed. There's tons of guys. Sonny Liston, obviously, but a long time ago. So southpaw is still less of a usual thing in boxing, I believe Pernell Whitaker was the first southpaw champion altogether, and that's only like 20, 30 years ago, which is crazy to think about. Michael Moorer is still the only heavyweight southpaw, I believe, to win a title. So southpaw really not as common in boxing at the highest levels, but it's certainly more common nowadays than it was like even 20 years ago. And Mayweather has fought some very good southpaws. As much as people don't believe that guys like Robert Guerrero and Victor Ortiz compare to someone like Manny Pacquiao, he also did fight Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao, even though he has flaws in areas that Mayweather exploited, he had no idea what to do when Mayweather tied up with him. He was really struggling. Every time he got in on Mayweather, he stepped in a lot of the time on the inside angle to try and set up those like 4 or 5 punch flurries that he does so well, and Mayweather would just pivot out and get away. But Manny Pacquiao is a guy who works great from both angles, works great with both hands. He's got so many skills that a lot of top southpaws don't have, and Mayweather handled him quite readily, no matter how you feel about the long wait to get that fight together. So this idea that southpaws are instant kryptonite to Mayweather is obviously false. However, a lot of people know Mayweather almost exclusively for the shoulder roll. He is a master of the shoulder roll, the Stonewall Philly shell, which I found out was a term coined by Fight Night. Those games were great, but I wouldn't use them as like historical document. I haven't made one of those in years, have they? They were really good. Very toxic though, and I was part of that problem. If you are only familiar with Floyd from the highlights, you will imagine that shoulder roll is like the be-all and end-all of his style. It is a lot of his style against orthodox fighters. That is his, that's his A game. But a lot of his style is also the fight at distance, the pull right hands, the leaping left hook into the clinch, right hand lead into the clinch. He does things very well at a distance, and then if guys get close to him, if he can get away with doing his Stonewall Philly shell, that's brilliant too. The great thing about the Stonewall, or the shoulder roll generally, is that it punishes the opponent for committing. If you watch Canelo Alvarez, huge right hand hitter. The more Mayweather baited him into hitting with his right hand, the harder he was punching, bouncing off Mayweather's shoulder, and then he was wide open for the counter. If you can get a guy to commit to big blows to your head with his right hand, that's his power hand. He's going to be close enough to hit, and he's going to have a little bit of recovery the harder he tries to hit you. It's a style that really punishes aggression. But against southpaws, that shoulder roll typically doesn't line up as well with the opponent's rear hand. So you can get their lead hand with the shoulder roll, which he did a lot against, can't even remember. DeMarcus whoever. He did that a lot against DeMarcus Thingy's lead hand, but the left hand can still sort of loop through. And where in the orthodox versus orthodox stance, your right hand is checking against left hooks and parrying or palming left jabs, you've only got that small motion, but the opponent's got a short path on his punch too. If you switch over and suddenly that hand is all the way behind them and they're chucking it in over long distance, it's a little bit more dangerous to just be trying to pat or catch the left hand. There's a great one from that DeMarcus whoever fight where the guy throws a long left hook with his southpaw rear hand, so left hook, and Mayweather tries to catch it on the glove and it just cracks him on the point of the chin, makes his legs wobble. And of course there's those clips of Zab Judah and Manny Pacquiao shooting left straights right down the center, straight through Mayweather's hand. But the number of times he's been hit clean are very few, and he adapts very, I think it was Luke Thomas was talking about this earlier last week, where he was saying Mayweather is a 6-round fighter, but the last 6 rounds, he takes 6 rounds to warm up, and then he's really worked you out, and he'll just relentlessly do whatever has been working. What you saw against guys like Guerrero especially, Guerrero is a great one because you get to see Mayweather against a guy with a good southpaw left, but on offense far more than he was against Manny Pacquiao. But Manny Pacquiao fight, he found out that he could get away from Pacquiao and fight very safe, so he did. Against Guerrero, he found that he could get off more offense, so he started just relentlessly hitting Guerrero with hard shots. The right-hand lead is a favourite of Floyd Mayweather's, even in fights against orthodox fighters. It's much like Roy Jones. He does that thing where his shoulders are slightly squared to begin with, and he'll put out a cigarette with his back foot, turn his knee down, and then just drive his hips forward. There isn't that rotation. It's not a big punch going kinetic chain from the floor to the shoulder to the chin. It's just like a little flick with the shoulder and arm almost. So it's more of a jabbing punch, but it's still stronger than like a jabbing jab. And it's a great way to set up that right-hand lead, which is an angle guys don't expect a lot, certainly not at that speed, and that in turn sets up the left hook very nicely. If you watch Roy Jones's career, he uses the right-hand lead almost as the jab to set up the left hook, as if the left hook was his right straight in a 1-2. Very interesting stuff. But Mayweather will throw that right-hand lead almost on its own and just weave or get into the clinch. Did that a lot against Ricky Hatton. Jaffa cake, bear with me. The interesting one is that Mayweather has had more trouble, I would say. Well, not more trouble, but I would say there's more of an opening for the right hook, the southpaw right hook. When Mayweather starts stepping in with his right hand lead, his left hand drops all the way down, and he often leans ahead of himself to try and get the punch to connect sooner and then fall into the clinch. He got clipped with some good right hooks by Pacquiao and DeMarcus, whose second name I'm still not looking up. And this is what's interesting about Mayweather. You're talking about a master boxer who's, the line that everyone's using on Mayweather's side of it, and I'm using, is that there's almost nothing he's not seen in the ring. But the thing about Mayweather is that no one skill or thing that he does is what makes him. It's the combination that makes the whole. So you can see him fight almost any of the skills that he has. You can see him fight against them in various matches, and how he deals with them. So, when he ducks into the clinch, guys just give up, especially Manny Pacquiao and Canelo Alvarez. Those are guys who are big combination punchers, very powerful punchers, Pacquiao, very fast puncher. But as soon as Mayweather ducked into the clinch, they were smothered. They were like, I don't know what to do here. But if you see people do the same thing to Mayweather, he's always on the back of their head, forearm down on the back of their head. If they try and stand up too strong, he'll do that Lomachenko favorite where he just palms them under his armpit, and then as they stand up, he'll crack them with the right straight. Or he'll just lean on the back of their head and make them carry him. Great fight. Well, we're going to talk about Cotto a lot. I was going to mention him last time as my fight to watch with the hint, how did he make Mayweather work so much when Mayweather loves to take breaks? But Cotto, the very first time he ducks in under a punch or something like that, Mayweather tries to snap him down, and Cotto immediately walks into him and picks him up. And you're like, is that, a lot of the commentary was like, oh, power move, just trying to show his dominance. But that is the way you deal with guys snapping you down. In boxing, you're not, if you fall on the floor, that's pretty bad. You can't do that every time the guy puts his forearm across the back of your neck and leans on you. But you can't just keep holding yourself up under that. If they do that 3 or 4 times around, it's really going to tire you out. So the idea is to get your hips in, lift him up as quick as possible. If you pick the guy up, fair enough, but the guy will probably let go most times. But as long as your back's straight, you'll be okay. It's that being bent over, carrying his weight that really tires guys. So it was great to see Cotto do that almost immediately when Mayweather went to that. That's a real secret of Mayweather's game. It's those little grey areas. You don't think about it much, but if I lean on the back of your head 4 times around, you're going to get tired of basically deadlifting me from a bent over position. And this is something we're going to talk about with McGregor, because I believe that it should be a big part of McGregor's game. Mayweather's game against southpaws gets a lot simpler. He really likes to use the inside angle, shoot the right straight and weave out to that side, but he also really he throws a jab, putting his foot to the inside of the opponent's foot, and then springs past them to about 90 degrees, so that he's coming from that open side. There's no shoulder to protect the opponent. They've only got their hand, and if they've been throwing at him while he's moving, their hand's out already, out of position. And what will happen is, when you take a good angle, the guy will turn to face you. So as they're turning, he blasts them with the right straight. It's a really good setup for a power punch. One of Mayweather's best power hitting techniques against southpaws. But it's also probably, one of the highest risk things he does. Because I've seen him in, every match he's had with a southpaw, he's done that and got cracked at one point. I don't think he did it against Manny Pacquiao, but he got hit by Robert Guerrero, he got hit by Shambe Mitchell. He got hit by DeMarcus, second name unknown, during that setup. So that's a real dangerous one. Really something that you'd like to see him save more until the later rounds, once he's got him tired a bit, slowing down. But a neat technique nonetheless. But Mayweather against southpaws, what you will notice constantly is, as soon as he hits the ropes, he ducks down to his right side very low, sometimes lower than the waist, which is illegal in amateur but legal in professional. But ducks down very low and either comes in on their hips or runs out to the side of them. And this was the constant theme with Manny Pacquiao. Either he'd look for the inside angle along the ropes and Mayweather would pivot free to the other side, or he'd look for the outside angle, shoot the left straight, Mayweather would take it in the chest or whatever, duck way down and come up on the clinch or run away. And I think if you're McGregor's team, knowing that you've got a decent ring cutter, well, certainly in MMA he's a great ring cutter, but I don't know how he'd look against a guy as good at directional changes as Mayweather, but you've got a decent ring cutter with some size and strength on Mayweather, because Mayweather doesn't typically, he walks around within 5 pounds of the weight, and he eats junk food through his camp. So, but obviously McGregor cuts big weight to make 145, it cuts big weight to make 155, but this fight's at 150. So he's going to have a bit of size and strength on him. Also, he's been wrestling for the last 10 years. Mayweather has been wrestling against guys who don't know how to wrestle. So much of Floyd Mayweather's game is the clinch, and this is what we talk about extensively in the primer. I think McGregor should be looking for the snap downs. I think he should be looking to use his hand to spin him out under the armpit. If you watch the fight, I don't want to be a dickhead and be like, watch the Paulie Malignaggi footage. But he does do that in the Malignaggi footage, which is a really good sign. Quick note on the Malignaggi footage: people got mad at me for being like, you can't tell much from that. Obviously, you can see that technique, which is a great thing if you want to see him doing that in the fight. But people were like, "Oh my god, knocking down world championship boxers." What I said at the time was, this is 10 seconds of footage, completely out of context. We don't know what happened before or after. That's not to say he wasn't beating him up before this, but if this is the 4th round and he's knocking down Paulie Malignaggi, super experienced boxer, really early in the sparring session, not early enough that it's like catching him off the bat, but he'll still be in decent shape. That's amazing. If it's the 12th round, I'm not too impressed. And then it came out that it was in the 12th round, and you're like, well, that's not as impressive, because you're getting a guy who last fought in March and then retired, so he will have let himself go a bit. And also, I mean, if you conditioning is like one of the first things lost for a fighter. That's why it's the most important thing in the fight game, getting in condition. Getting in condition for a 12-round fight is an arduous ordeal. That's why they only have championship fights for 12 rounds. But Conor McGregor being paid millions to be in the peak shape of his life against a guy who's coming in sort of to help him, didn't know they were going 12 rounds, and then they dragged him into the 12th round. That is where you're like, okay, that's, even if he was getting lit up before that, the conditioning is going to play a real factor in the 12th round. McGregor is a consummate athlete. He's a guy who's working to be in shape, coming in the peak condition of his life. And Malignaggi's a retired guy, you know. It's impressive to land punches on Malignaggi, but again, it's not that impressive to knock him down in the 12th round of a sparring session when he thought he was going to be doing like 6. They done him dirty. I didn't like what they did to Malignaggi, but you got to sell fights somehow. There's so many people being manipulated and used in this fight. It's pretty dreadful, to be honest. You know, I think I was watching Robin, who is my friend, Robin Black, get really excited about this and how he was being allowed to plug it for the UFC and analyze it. And I feel like the UFC are just sort of using him because he is very high on McGregor at the moment. Braden Schaub, I believe, is using this. You know, I think he's doing a much better job of this because I don't know if he believes his own crap at all. But by being the first guy to pick McGregor publicly, and you know, people are now going to call him a fool and laugh at him, but he has advanced his career massively by doing that. So add Paulie Malignaggi to the list of people used in this fight. But at any rate, that clinch is going to be the most interesting question about this fight because I watched almost all of Mayweather's fights in the past 3 months. I mean, that's what took half the time there. You know, they're all decisions. But the most obvious thing was that he doesn't, you know, he's a 40 punch around fighter, and that's thrown, not landed. He lands at a great percentage, like one of the best ever, but he throws 40 round punches around on average, so he's not an active fighter. What he does is deny his opponent opportunities by being beyond range or too close to hit, you know, in the clinch. The fight that I meant to mention last time we convened for this podcast was Miguel Cotto versus Floyd Mayweather, and by extension, Marcos Maidana versus Floyd Mayweather 1. Those fights are interesting because Floyd isn't allowed to use the clinch to re-establish distance. And this is something that really annoys me going back through and watching his fights. Kenny Bayless is a terrible referee regarding the clinch. I mean, he's good regarding others. This is the thing about boxing generally. It's like when you have a Supreme Court justice or a judge or someone who's been given these written rules, but they are very much open to interpretation. That's what a referee is in a fight. You know, holding is a foul, but they very rarely warn Mayweather for the amount of times that he reaches out to hold. But then they stop the bout when Bayless stops the bout as soon as he holds without giving the other guy any time to work free. If you compare that with Tony Weeks, who people were ragging on for his missing of low blows in the second Kovalev-Ward fight, but very good at allowing guys to work out of the clinch. And he allowed Cotto the time. Mayweather could never hold him long enough that, you know, anyone watching it thought, oh my god, just break him, they're holding too much. Every time Cotto freed his arms and started working again. And then he also refereed the first Maidana fight. Maidana, a lot less technical in his breaking out of the clinch, but almost every time got out of it and was able to start swinging free again. Then you compare that with the second Maidana fight. As soon as Mayweather puts his arms around him, like, we're not even talking overhook and underhook, we're not talking double overhooks, you know, the classical tie-ups. We're talking throwing both arms around his shoulders as if he's hugging, and then Bayless is already in there while Maidana's still trying to work. The breaks in that fight are absolutely abysmal. Then there was another weird one, Vic Draculich or something like that, from the first Castillo fight. When Mayweather holds, he's a lot less keen on the holding, but he allows the holding, but he hates when Mayweather pushes, like literally pushes the guy. And he's one of the few to like warn about the elbow coming in. But he misses like a massive forearm smash and then penalizes Floyd just for projecting the elbow. So everyone has like their pet peeves and things as a referee. I just wish there were more agreement on letting guys work from the clinch. I mean, yes, you will get the occasional more boring fight where the guy who has gone for the clinch is able to hold the clinch consistently, and the other guy is just hopeless working out of it. But you will get more interesting fights from letting guys work on the inside than from just saying, okay, break, back out to distance again. It basically, if everyone refereed like Kenny Bayless, the infight would be a position that both guys had to consent to. There would be no working against a long-distance boxer and forcing the infight on him, because he could just throw his arms loosely around you, and then the referee moves you back out to distance. And if they're real smart, like Roy Jones, they walk around the back of the referee, and suddenly there's no hope of you getting back in. I mean, if you want to look at the Cotto one or the Maidana one, there's nothing magic about Mayweather's clinch. It's his use of it and his knowing how to slip and get into it. The hold itself, nothing special. Very hard to hold on to a guy with boxing gloves. A little bit easier if you can pinch the boxing glove itself under your armpit. But if you watch the Cotto fight especially, if you watch a load of old Rocky Marciano fights, like against really good boxers like Ezard Charles, if you watch Julio Cesar Chavez, Henry Armstrong, people like that, Roberto Duran, if you come in and the guy dives one arm under your armpit, as Mayweather always does with his left arm, you keep your head between their head and your chest, or your chest and their chest, depending on how high or low you want to put it, and you just swim that arm back in. And it works an awful lot. It worked every time for Cotto, and it allowed him to free his hands and start trying to attack. And Mayweather did a great job of using his shoulder roll after that, but he was forced to actually fight in every round, as opposed to taking these huge breaks where he holds. And he called that the hardest fight of his career, because basically Cotto gave him no breaks. The Maidana one is hilarious. I'm making Maidana versus Broner my fight of the week this week. But I loved watching that after watching the first Maidana fight. I watched the second Maidana fight and it bored me to tears, but ages ago, live that is. But I watched the first Maidana fight again a couple of weeks ago, or this week or whenever, and I was blown away. It was really entertaining. He punches like a spastic octopus, but it's so entertaining. And in the Broner one, he's really good because he uses a body jab to set up this left hook. Like he'll look at the body, lower his level, and then swing his arm all the way around, knocks Broner down with it. It's awesome. And actually, what I said at the time about that fight was that Adrian Broner is like Floyd Mayweather, but only at range. Like he doesn't understand any of the working in the grey areas, I always call it. He doesn't understand any of the stuff like the tie-ups, the snap-downs, all that stuff that Mayweather does that's not really what we consider boxing, but makes him so much better than all the other boxers. Broner has none of that. He really just had the shoulder roll and a nice jab and some stuff like that. You know, all the razzle-dazzle, but none of the gritty stuff. Unfortunately, McGregor is the kind of guy who does, when he comes forward, allow guys to duck in on his hips, and then he breaks the clinch after that. Did a nice one against Eddie Alvarez, where he caught the overhook and used the web of the hand under the neck, you know, quote-unquote rape choke. But that's a really nice position, generally. Not going to be allowed in boxing, especially as the gloves have the thumb taped in now, specifically to stop people from thumbing each other in the eye and choking each other in the clinches. But I would like to see him, because Mayweather always, when put to the ropes by a southpaw, in fact, put to the ropes by almost anyone, if he can't escape to his left with the pivot and the check hook, he will duck down to his right, look for the clinch. If he can snap him down, that's awesome. But if he can keep his head between his chest and Mayweather's, that's an awesome thing to do too. Catch the overhook with his right arm, and then start working uppercuts and hooks to the body, Roberto Duran style. That'd be lovely to see. More importantly, my advice for McGregor in this fight would be to foul the shit out of him. I mean, Mayweather fouls a lot generally with his elbow. Doesn't tend to headbutt that much. But tons of elbow work, tons of, really playing fast and loose with the clinch rules and the snap downs and things. But it would be great to see McGregor using the overhook to really punish Mayweather going for clinches. The great thing about the overhook is that, Maidana looked for that straight arm bar that Mike Tyson tried to get on. I think it was Francois Botha. You will never, ever get that. You won't be able to break someone's arm like that. It just doesn't happen. There's not enough. You can't bring your elbow in far enough to create that amount of pressure on a grown man's arm without him bending his arm. What you can, and you also, you won't get the full John Jones get their elbow to the middle and then pull it right up their sternum. But you will be able to, generally in boxing, you can squeeze that elbow down and bring it in towards their center line with a little jerk, and that fucks people's elbows up hard if they're not tensed for it, if they're not good at wrestling. It's a great way to just start tweaking that shoulder joint in clinches. And the example I used of this, Sandy Sadler versus Willie Pep, is an amazing example. Sandy Sadler, lanky guy, but an infighter, taught George Foreman a lot of what he knew. But he fought Willie Pep, who, if you know Willie Pep, he's so classy on the feet. His footwork is unique. He dances around a lot, dances out to the left side, changes stance, comes back in. Really graceful boxer. But Sandy Sadler roughed him up. They fought 4 times. he knocked him out 3 times, or TKO, because that's what we're going to get onto. One of them wasn't really a knockout. And the second fight that they had, Pep won, and that was like the best Pep had ever looked. But the third and fourth, Sadler just came back and crushed him again. Sadler fouled him every which way. Pep started fouling back, but when Pep tied up, Sadler went on this overhook, and he was looking for uppercuts with the free arm, and he deliberately missed them so that his elbow sliced through. But I put up a clip of him ragdolling Pep around by the overhook, and actually knocking over the ref while he did it. That's on the fightprimer.com, another plug. But people are like, oh my, I put in the description because the third fight was called off because Pep retired due to a shoulder injury. Sadler was doing this in every clinch. The clip I used wasn't even from the third fight, it was from the fourth fight. He was just, any time they got in the clinch, he was ragdolling him by the overhook and just trying to fuck up his shoulder. And even if you don't fuck it up, like cause an injury or a muscle strain or a tear, you're going to tire the guy out from having to deal with that. And of course, if you're moving him around, that's time he can't be hitting or looking to foul you in turn. Nice bonus from the great champ Thomas. If you drop your left hand down to your side, if you're overhooking with the right arm, and turn your shoulder in, it looks like you're just trying to hug the guy close. A lot of guys like James Toney used to catch used to catch an overhook with his right arm and then cup underneath that same side like he was going for a shoulder throw or arm drag. Just pull that elbow in close so that the opponent could only hit him in the back with this free hand. But if you do that with the hand down by your side, you can crack him in the cup, which is always a nice bonus. So that would be great to see. Snap downs, really want to see those constantly, and passing Mayweather out either to his left side if he's using his left arm to check, or right side with his right arm, and trying to line up shots that way. Something I didn't mention in any of my breakdowns is Mayweather, against southpaws, likes to switch stances occasionally. And he does it really cleverly because he does it as soon as the referee breaks them from a clinch or something like that. He'll just come back in the opposite stance. He never changes stance in front of a guy. He comes back in southpaw and then he'll throw a punch, hit him with it, and go back into his orthodox stance to follow up. Did it against DeMarcus, did it against Chambé. He hit Chambé Mitchell with a beautiful left straight from a southpaw stance, and then he hit DeMarcus Thingy with a right hook from a southpaw stance, which was really nice. In fact, he did some shoulder rolling from his southpaw stance in that fight too. Actually, there's always something that's interesting to consider. If you've got one guy who's switch hitting and one guy who's staying still, the guy who's switch hitting normally has an edge because he knows he's working against one thing all the time. The other guy's having to switch in his head what he's doing. If both guys start switch hitting, both guys get a lot more hittable because there's that not quite knowing what you're dealing with from each stance. If you watch Kevin Kelly versus Prince Naseem Hamed, both of them are switching stances and getting knocked down like 3 times each. McGregor likes switching stances, Mayweather likes switching stances, so it'd be interesting if that, by switching stances loads, McGregor can cause more sort of chaos in there and make it less clean. And a clean fight is probably not in McGregor's interest. So let's round it up. I mean, really, the game plan for Floyd Mayweather is to be the better boxer. I mean, there's not much more you could say about that. Just land his right hand lead, use the jab, because McGregor will have dealt with so few good jabs, especially, against orthodox fighters. He got jabbed up a bit by Nate Diaz, but a lot of orthodox fighters in MMA don't even bother with the jab against southpaws because of the clash of lead hands. The body jab is a standard of the Mayweather arsenal, but really, the weird thing about Floyd Mayweather is that a lot of his power punches aren't that powerful, but a lot of his regular punches are power punches. Like his power's in weird places. So that body jab is a real hurter. The right straight to the body, obviously he finished Chambé Taylor with that. Chambé Mitchell, sorry. Great punch for hurting a southpaw, and a nice long one too. Does expose the jaw a little bit though on both sides, especially if you drop your left hand like Mayweather often does. He used a great counter right uppercut to the body against Maidana the second time. But working the body would be great for Mayweather, and then just limiting the exchanges and scoring on the outside. But, if you can do the Mayweather leaning on the rope shoulder roll stuff against McGregor, might be a great idea, because if there's one thing McGregor has shown, it's that when he gets on offense and thinks that he's doing well, he can tire himself out like he did against Nate Diaz both times. I mean, realistically, this could be Mayweather going to a conservative 12-round decision and alienating every fan in the sport again. But you've got to think, if he puts the pace on McGregor, 12 rounds boxing is very new to McGregor. Against a world-class professional. Even the guys he's been working with at the gym, while Malignaggi was a step above them all, the best guy he's got in there, I think, is Deshaun, what's his name, Johnson? But he's got like a 20-20 record. He's not been working with really guys who are there to test him or put a whoop in on him. Whereas, got Mayweather working with guys like Zab Judah, he might have fallen off pretty hard, but he's still a world-class boxer. In fact, Zab Judah is the guy who gave him so much trouble in the first 4 rounds as a southpaw. So that's an interesting one that he's got in his camp now. But yeah, 12 rounds of boxing is new to McGregor, so you would expect that to tire him. I think if Mayweather commits to the bodywork and really... the other thing is that McGregor doesn't really work against guys who are very good at feinting and just keeping you on edge. Mayweather is very good. Andre Verde did a great interview about this. He was like, the way that he opens his eyes or looks at you, you just think he's going to do something and then he doesn't. Keeping guys on edge and tensed up is a great way to tire them out. But more than that, McGregor's favourite counter is that step back left hand. If he moves every time the guy feints, it's going to get very old for him quickly. And, a lot of guys, if you feint at them a few times, they will stop countering or stop trying to counter as readily. They'll take their finger off the trigger a little bit, and that's when you can actually crack them with shots that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do without getting countered. So yeah, that's the main, Mayweather's path to victory is to box. Don't get caught up in the grey areas that he uses against guys who are world-class boxers. McGregor, foul the shit out of him. Use the overhook to tear on his shoulder. Try and keep the head between between their chests. Keep him out of the clinch. Keep him in that area that's between the clinch and boxing range. Keep a hold of him. Try and hold and hit if he can. Obviously a foul, but see what you can do. But I think, one of the things about Mayweather is that he likes to hang out on the edge of distance so that he can hit that pull counter. It's a real flashy move and it scores good points for him. And also it's a power punch. But he does that from right on the end of range. So if you step towards him, he'll step back. And that happens a lot in his fights. He'll go all the way around the ring just trying to keep that distance just to get that one counter off. Marcus Maidana, by coming in constantly with the double jab, the jab to the body, the high-low, triple jab up, down, up, things like that, showing lots of feinted jabs, just kept Mayweather moving backwards. He wasn't scaring Mayweather, but Mayweather kept moving backwards because he was like, no, re-establish that distance, I want to get this counter off. And by doing that, he made Mayweather hit the ropes almost at will. And that's when he started doing his good work. I think you've got to square him up if you get him on the ropes, put the head in his chest or under his face so that he is square, so that he can't roll with the stuff, and then dig to the body. But I think double jabbing towards the ropes and then throwing the left hand, going for the sternum, because Mayweather's going to duck out to his right, always. Step deep to the outside of his lead foot so that he can't pivot off. Shoot the left straight, try and hit him in the sternum so that you've got something there holding him back when he ducks in. And then try and get a left uppercut into the sternum, to the solar plexus afterwards. If you watch the Castillo fight, he did a very good job with his jab and left uppercut. He'd show the jab, Mayweather would duck in, and he'd throw his hips back almost like he was sprawling. Squaring the hips so that like he was dealing with a takedown tip, basically. And then he'd hit him with a left uppercut to the solar plexus, which was really nice. I think that would be a good way to try and, at least get some shots in on Mayweather in the early rounds. I think if you keep hitting him in the chest with the left straight, catching him with the left body shots, tiring him by leaning on the neck, if all that stuff works, then the left straight upstairs will start to connect later. I mean, could be that McGregor's left straight is fast enough and long enough that it gets in the opening round. I mean, I don't know. That's why we have the fights. But I feel like starting on the sternum and then working upwards later is the way to go with that. If I were, someone in his camp. But it'd be interesting because I think that Owen Roddy and John Kavanagh are very smart guys. I think, as much as everyone says like he shouldn't box Mayweather, he should try and, out MMA him or something like that. I don't think we're talking like karate angles or something like that, because there's only so many ways you can hit a guy if only 2 fists are allowed. But I do think they'll have looked at the fact that Mayweather clinches in every fight and uses it a lot to take breaks. So that'll be really fascinating to see how that plays out. I think the fight's a crock of shit, but I think there are going to be some interesting lessons from it. And I hope that people learn their lesson, like, regarding this, because I said this in my article, but fighting is a democracy, and the only way you have a vote is how many dollars you spend at the gate or on pay-per-view. If you spend $1, that's a vote for more like this, please. So now we have shit like Rico Verhoeven taking on Bigfoot Silver in Glory. I love the Glory lads. We get on very well. They let me use their videos and stuff. But this is a really dumb fight, and they've been like trying to keep Rico busy for a while now. You know, without the second batter fight, which everyone wants, there's not a lot for him to be doing. But Bigfoot Silver, really, I mean, you're going to bring in some people who just morbidly want to see him get knocked out, but I don't think... I mean, at a certain point you have to say no. I don't want Glory to be 1990s K1 with Gary Goodridge, or rather 2000s K1 with Gary Goodridge. I think at a certain point the promoter has to say no, let's not do that. So, for God's sake, if this fight, you know, after this fight, if they start talking about Malignaggi versus McGregor, please don't buy it. I want to see McGregor fight the best lightweights in the world, in MMA. I don't want to watch him box some old man. You know, Paulie Malignaggi was not an entertaining fighter at the best of times, but I don't want to watch him at 40 taking on Conor McGregor in a boxing match when, you know, you got a murderer's row in that lightweight division in the UFC. And the most annoying thing now is that McGregor has become like an Anderson Silva figure, where, like, if you say, oh, I'd love to see him fight so-and-so, people go, oh, no, you just knock him out. You're like, fuck off, that's not an answer. That's why I want to see the fight. Anyway, let's do some quick questions. I've rambled about this fight for too long now. I mean, some people have been going on about this for fucking weeks, but I feel like I've talked about it too much just talking for whatever it is, half an hour. Right, I went to the Facebook thread and asked for some questions. Top question, what the hell happened to Andy Risti? If you know anything about this podcast, that's something I ask almost every week. I believe he's doing a degree, or he was doing a degree in computer science or something like that, or had a job in computer science. So, sorry, I forgot to even mention it. Brian Stan is leaving the UFC commentary booth, which I really bugs me, or bums me out rather. You know, I'm not like annoyed by it because it's his choice, but he was really good. The guy took it so seriously, researched his job so well. He was watching these guys that I'd never heard of, and he'd say, I watched so-and-so's last 3 fights, I think that he does this a lot. And I'm going, fucking hell, I wouldn't have even looked at that, you know, even if I was paid to. The guy was an absolute marvel at his job. He's always really nice to me, and I hope he stays around in the MMA community and does some stuff with it. But I think he's doing real estate now. He's also doing a lot of charity work with veterans, I believe. But he was talking about real estate, and someone said, would you ever take that job, Jack? I thought, like, maybe if they paid me in real estate, and then I'd have, like, the 2 bases covered. But yeah, Brian Stan, awesome guy, and just really, like, hard-working. And that was always what came through in his fights. Like, he wasn't the best fighter naturally, but he was really hard-working, and sometimes he came in with really well-thought-out game plans and stuck to them well. But in his post-UFC career as an analyst and commentator, it really came through how hard he was working on all that stuff. And, you know, that's where, like, you know, Brian Stan isn't going to win the light heavyweight title of the UFC off John Jones, you know, because John Jones has all that natural talent. But I can assure you that Brian Stan would be better in his post-UFC career as an analyst than John Jones would, just based on the amount of work that he did and the understanding he had of the game, perhaps by not being like a super freak athlete. Sorry, that question was from the Andy Risti one was from Carlos. Chris says, is there a bigger piece of shit than John Jones? Steady on, it could all be a misunderstanding. He could have just had another tainted supplement or something. Which is, you know, if we believe for even a moment the Viagra story, why would you continue to shovel unregulated supplements into your body? Just, it's God testing him, that's what it is. Dermot says John Jones versus YouTube, who has demonstrated the worst judgment. Oh, I don't know, that's a close one. Vincent said, are there any advantages to having inside lead foot position on the open guard matchup? Yep, just like I said about Mayweather just then. You are not taking yourself away from the opponent's power side, but you are going towards that open side so that their back is not protecting them. You know, that's the half the shoulder roll. Your back and your shoulder are protecting you. If you walk around to the other side towards their rear hand, you're really only dealing with their rear hand. You can do a reverse shoulder roll, but you have to square your hips completely to do it. In fact, go all the way through. Gyaku Hanmi, as they call it in karate. So yeah, there's a lot of this thing where, like, there's only one or the other. and I wrote stuff about this a few years ago that was just because I was focused on the basic idea. Everything there's an advantage to doing the opposite in almost everything, but the inside angle's become much more popular nowadays, particularly with guys like Manny Pacquiao doing so well throwing combinations off it. Manny Pacquiao goes to that inside angle to jab, throw the left straight, and then he'll throw the up jab with the right hand and the left straight again, and then run off to the inside angle. If you want to watch someone work with the inside angle, he's your man. Nika says, what are the most interesting matchups in your opinion we never got to see? Lewis versus Ali, Boubacar versus Yodson Clay, some from MMA. I think Lewis was a good deal before Ali's time. I don't think there was ever like oh god, we just missed it. If we're talking about from that era, I believe Kenny Norton and Joe Frazier never fought, despite almost everyone else in the heavyweight division fighting each other during that time. I think they were the same gym because they were both with Eddie Futch, but that would have been awesome. Both great left hookers. Norton more sort of jabbing guy, worked well behind his lead shoulder. Frazier more cross guard, squared up stuff. But I think they would have had a banger. Boubacar versus Yodson Clay. I've seen so many articles on my YouTube feed. Everyone sends me them when they come up, like, finally signed, and you're like, oh, awesome, and then it never happens. Did Yod ever fight Giorgio Petrosian? I can't even remember. I know that Boubacar did. Someone said BJ Penn versus Sakuraba. Yeah, that would have been interesting. Fedor versus Couture, really good one. Early 2000s, that would have been great. Back when they had Randy coming over to commentate Pride, that would have been a really interesting matchup. Bas Rutten, there was a lot of stuff about Bas Rutten coming back and fighting for Pride, but they talked about Bas Rutten versus Vandy, and I think that's a really interesting fight. I mean, Vandy probably better on the ground, probably better in the clinch, but Bas Rutten, very, very much a hard guy, a grit down on your mouthpiece and swing, but a bit more technical on the feet than Vandy. Well, a lot more technical on the feet than Vandy, but yeah, he was a technical brawler almost. God, if you could put like whoever trained Matt Brown in with like a prime Bas Rutten, that would be amazing. John asks, are we allowed to get excited about Japanese prospect Tenshin Nasukawa yet? I'm already excited, but I'm already at the point where I'm like, I know only 1 in every 4 fights will matter. They will give him so many bollocks fights and mixed rules and just matches against schlubs too. Japanese MMA, not good at developing prospects. Nick said, this is a good one actually. Nick says, following the John Jones story, do your opinions / feelings regarding a fighter's legacy or place in history ever change as a result of popping for steroids? If you're, this is the attitude with a lot of journalists too, but, if you're in the game, this stuff happens. You know that there's guys getting away with it. Guys do not just take drugs and then fail the test immediately. There would be no point doing that. Guys get away with it a lot, so they try it. It's not the case where, oh God, the 2 times I actually cheated, I got caught. Obviously guys are getting away with it, but the feeling in sports generally is pass the tests. We don't give a shit if you are actually using, but please pass the tests so that we can claim that you're not and turn a blind eye. The thing is that the UFC got baited into this thing where like everyone was talking about how all the MMA fighters are roid heads and this, that and the other, and they got baited into doing this USADA thing. So they're spending a lot of money to take their own events apart. got way more pullouts due to injuries now. And then you got guys like John Jones coming back, winning the fight, making the guy who's clean look bad, and then having to disappear again. But the UFC basically undid themselves with getting into the USADA stuff. The NFL, if you notice the NFL, they don't want to catch people. Major League Baseball doesn't want to catch people. They'll do stuff. They'll say that they've improved their protocol, but none of them are going to the lengths the UFC did. Actually, I made a joke about this today, saying that it must be awkward in the Jones household because the other 2 brothers who play in the NFL are just they work on like the NFL testing, which is like a handshake and a wink. But Jones actually gets tested properly. However, then I found out that his brother managed to fail a drug test in the NFL. If you do that, it's because you're really stupid or really, really unlucky. But I feel like I have very mixed feelings because I understand that guys cheat. And I understand that it's not necessarily cheating. It's guys wanting to be able to train more and using... or, wanting to not drop out due to injury. and using drugs. But very few people are coming into the cage roided up to the gills. They don't have roid strength entering the cage, but they do have the effects of using stuff in their camp. Being able to get more reps in, being able to get more sessions in. I have always respected people like Paulo Miau's an interesting one that came out the other day. Josh Barnett, who I like a lot as a person generally. So that's going to colour my view a little bit, and as a fighter, to be honest. But what I always respected about Josh Barnett is that there wasn't this lengths to make excuses, And Paulo Miau's another one where he just said, "Okay, got caught, sorry." And even if you're like, sorry, not sorry, I respect that so much more than giving me that I found God now and this, that, and the other. I found God, so I definitely wouldn't cheat to be better at my job. The fact that we're supposed to believe it, it's just insulting. So I've got very mixed feelings. I mean, I believe he's the best ever at light heavyweight, and I believe that if someone else asked further down the comments, would Cormier do better if he wasn't on the juice? You can't say that really definitively. You can't say that. We can't say definitively that anyone's not using, really. Even though we had those really whacked out epitestosterone to testosterone levels, I think it was both of them after the first Jones-Cormier fight. But the thing is that Daniel Cormier was doing amazingly in the second fight anyway. As I watched it, I thought he was doing brilliant work. And the head kick really saved Jones from 5 hard rounds of that. So, even if this hadn't come out, I would have been interested in the third fight. But anyway, looks like he'll be out for another 4 years, so we'll see how that works out. Oh, good question here. Nick says, Patreon boy here, Jack. I just watched your primer video dissecting Conor and in particular setting up his left hand. Do you have any tips on crafting your overall game around your strongest technique in practice? What I really like as a mental exercise is that if you've got a technique you really like, I really like my right round kick to the body. I really like my right straight. I like all my right-handed techniques really. But if you've got a technique, consider it from setting up off each other limb. Then consider it, if it's a straight technique, consider setting it up with a linear technique and then setting it up with a straight technique. And then the other one is to consider it setting up while moving in and then while moving out. Because a lot of Mayweather in particular, I was noticing, he'll get chest to chest with the guy, start doing the shoulder roll stuff, and then he'll pull his head way back, step back, so that his right hand then comes back in as a full straight when it wouldn't have before, which is a really interesting one. Yeah, so just consider messing with distance. Level is another one. Level change, right straight to the head becomes right straight to the body or whatever, or right straight to the body suddenly becomes right straight to the sternum or the top of the collar. Just start thinking about how you can move around doing these things. Mental exercises like that are so much fun. I've been having so much fun watching Gary Tonon's game because he always does that thing where he stands up in a horse straddle stance while the guy's on his knees, and he presents about 5 different opportunities to be taken down by a single leg, but he'll look for chokes and leg locks and things off it. I really like that, just creating opportunities for your favourite technique as opposed to just going with what you're dealt. Can McGregor get the glory lightweight belt after this boxing thing does not work out? It'd be interesting to watch at least. But again, fight some fucking MMA fighters, please. Rigondeaux versus Lomachenko. Yes, if you hadn't heard, I'm now Big Fight Jack. I only talk about the big fights, but Rigo versus Lomachenko is a big fight. Can't wait to watch that. And it's good to see Rigondeaux getting back in the mix because his manager has basically kept him fighting like no one for the last 5 years. There was... about 2 years ago, we were all like, this guy is the hottest thing going. And then he just sort of disappeared because he wasn't fighting anyone. Is the super fight recession proof? Yes, fighting is one of the few businesses that tends to do well in a recession. People like violence. In fact, people like sports generally during a recession. Baseball did well in the Great Depression, and that's the most boring sport in the world. Though they did have Babe Ruth storming through at the time. So... It was the end of the Deadpool era as well, wasn't it? Because of that guy getting beamed in the head. Is Mayweather versus McGregor the most MMA thing to ever happen? Yeah. Right, anyway, God, we're running quite late now. I've finished my whole sleeve of Jaffa cakes while I was talking to you. We'll have a big catch-up after the fight. I think I'm probably going to write a piece for Vice, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what I will write. I'm currently writing something for Battles of London. Really excited for that. Buy their first magazine, because it'll be really interesting. They sponsored Polaris, too. Their stuff is good-looking stuff. But I'll be writing something about them, for them, about the Marquess of Queensberry rules, how they came in, and a little bit about the Marquess of Queensberry. Because if you didn't know, his son was the one getting buggered by Oscar Wilde, and he ruined Oscar Wilde's life as a result. But we'll talk then. If you're not a member of the Patreon, get on the Patreon, because I might use it to fund my own website now. If I want to, I'm thinking about just keeping it as the Big Fight website and doing primers for each of the really big fights that comes along. Don't know, but get on the Patreon. If you donate $5 a month, we do a massive history lecture at the end of every month. And those are pretty good. They're well received. If you haven't bought Notorious, the Conor McGregor thing could be over after this weekend, so go buy it. It's a great book. It's about fighting. It's not just about Conor McGregor, and it certainly weighs up the pros and cons of the direction that the fight game is moving at the moment. And finally, go to the Fight Primer and bookmark it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but if I do something, it'll be big. Because I'm Big Fight Jack. Right, I'm your boy Jack Slack. This has been the Fights Gone By podcast. Thank you for your patience with me, especially to the Patreon boys and people like that, but also just the people who supported me. And it's good to be back on schedule. Conor bless. Bless Conor. Hello, stranger. It's your boy, the love child of Joe Rogan and Terry Wogan, Jack Slack. And this is the Fights Gone By podcast, episode 49, a very special Fights Gone By podcast, because we're talking about the preordained biggest fight ever, the one to decide the rivalry, the bragging rights, who gets to claim the accomplishments. It's John Jones versus drug testing. No, we're going to be talking about Mayweather and McGregor, but before I recorded this